tuning into my Q&A this week. As you maybe can tell, I have a cold, so I might be a little bit more difficult to understand than normal. I hope you'll forgive me. Some of the questions I'm going to talk about in this Q&A are on playing over fast tempos and working towards playing over fast tempos. I'm going to talk about comping, and I'm also going to talk about comping with a piano player, so there you have two people laying down the harmony at the same time, and some of the problems that can lead to. And then I'm going to talk about harmonizing outside ideas. So if you have something that's outside, can you put a chord under it, and how do you work with it, and what options does that give you? Last time I posted some questions in the Q&A video about the format of the videos and saying that I wanted to experiment a bit. Of course, that didn't really change yet because I didn't really make anything really new in terms of how I make my lessons. But I got a lot of feedback, and that's really great. It's really nice that I can use you guys to sort of spin ideas against and talk about what I'm planning to do and hear what you think and get some really useful feedback. And I got really a lot of feedback, both as comments and emails, and I'm really grateful for that. So I'm gonna probably talk more about the different types of content in these videos, just to hear from you guys what you think. That's just nice for me to hear what you think. And the Q&A guys are usually the ones that are leaving the most comments and paying most attention to stuff like that. So thank you for that. If you have a question in general, so anything about harmony or soloing or playing with others, gear, stuff like that, then leave a comment on this video or send me a message on Facebook or Instagram or Snapchat or any other email is also good, of course. And of course, if you like this video, then please like it here on YouTube, and you can also subscribe to my channel if you're not already subscribed. And another thing you can do is also you can sign up for my mailing list for my monthly newsletter. That's also another way to just get not feedback, but get information on where I'm playing and if something new is happening or if I'm being interviewed somewhere. Let's get to the questions. I'm not sure if you touched on this in other lessons, but I was wondering if you have any advice for soloing on fast tempos. I just can't seem to play smooth rhythms on it even after practicing a bunch. I think it might be a technique problem, but I'm not sure. It's usually not a problem until I get up to tempos 200 or higher. Playing fast tempos, so medium up and up swing tempos, are tricky, and there are a few things that are tricky about them. I think one thing is that when we're playing this, we tend to feel jazz in quarter notes very often, so it gets really stressed. Once it's 200, then your foot is doing this all the time, and you get really tired, and it's kind of hard to keep it steady. So there are a few things with that you have to be aware of. So I think it's important to really feel higher tempos. If you're in 200 and above 200, start to feel at least half, maybe start even to feel the whole bar as the beat, and think of it like that. I think that's sort of, it's more relaxed and you can better relate to it. And then of course you're feeling that as the beat, and then you're just feeling a subdivision above it, and then that's going to be like, if it's halftime you feel 16th, or otherwise it's like 32nd notes that you're feeling as a flow over the piece. And then you of course have to think your lines in bigger chunks. So you can't think about every note when you're playing this fast. Probably you're not doing that already, but you have to be aware of it, that's going to happen, that you have to play stuff that's a little bit more leaning on physical movement in your fingers than actually hearing each note as a melody when you're playing this tempo, because it's just, you don't have time to do that, so you have to rely a little bit more on what you already have in your fingers and piece together your vocabulary like that. So that's sort of the things that I think are most difficult about playing faster tempos. So I guess there is sort of a checklist that you can go through if you want to see if you can play at a tempo. So if I take, let's see, I don't know how this is going to come across in the video, but if I take this tempo, so this is this is 232, this is 204. So when I play this tempo, like every quarter note, that's too much. Like I don't want to keep my foot moving that fast. I probably, I'm not sure if I would feel this as whole or as half. I don't always tap my foot, so that's hard to say. But I probably, let's say that I do half. And then we have, so that has to feel kind of comfortable. and I'm trying to talk while I'm keeping the groove, which should be kind of possible also. These kind of things can be sort of good indicators of how well you feel a tempo. See, now when I really start talking, then I lose it, and then I move it to 1 and 3. But yeah, so it has to be easy to just feel the groove, and you don't want to check that with soloing in 8 notes. That's not gonna work. So maybe just try and do some simple comping on a tune. Just to have, I'm leaving it on just to sort of really sort of emphasize the thing with the groove. So I hope it's not gonna sound really horrible in the video, but yeah. So do some simple comping. So if I play a chorus, it's gonna be something like. It has to feel fairly comfortable, because that's how the tune sounds. And I think technically, and also just rhythmically, you feel the groove a lot better if you just keep on playing comping on it and not trying to play lines, because the lines are technically just so much more difficult. And then of course you need to check if you can play your scales in this tempo. And I take it you know the piece, so the different scales and in one position and stuff like that. That should be no problem. You should have that already. And then you just need to know, like, if you can do just simple, like, okay, how does that feel? Does it feel really stressed to do this? And that shouldn't be the case, because then it's going to be really difficult to play a solo on it, I think. And then once you have that, now you know, you have some sort of idea, like, okay, I can kind of feel this tempo. And then you can try and solo on it. And then again, I think the important thing is that you don't try to feel every beat. So you're kind of playing 16 notes, and you're feeling just the 1 and the 3, or just the 1. And that means that you have sort of, you don't have, like, it shouldn't be stressy, and you can lean back a little bit. And if you're not playing, then you don't have, like, going on all the time. Which I think that's not a nice feeling if you're improvising. I don't like to have, like, a steady beat. Also, if I'm playing with somebody and we're playing this tempo, I don't want to hear a quarter note, like a quarter note thing in the bass drum or something like that. It's not going to really make too much sense. So yeah, so I'm feeling it half, and then just try and solo on it. Something like this, and of course you need to find, so find the tempo where you really, now we can sort of turn this off. So now you need to find the tempo where you can do this in. Make sure that you're warmed up first. That's of course also important. And take a tune that you know really well, that doesn't have too many changes, but also not too few, I guess. But yeah, so something that's easy to play and that you know well, and don't start with giant steps. And then then check if you really feel the groove. Make sure that you can feel it in a way where it's like that it feels, because basically what it's becoming is like it's a medium tempo, and then you're just playing double time, but that just feels, this is not so stressful, and it doesn't cost so much energy to keep this groove going, and I think that's really important when you have to play over it. And of course you can start working on that, because you say this thing with smooth rhythm, but I'm guessing that that's not so much the problem. Of course you can take, if you have rhythms that don't work, if you record yourself and you can figure out, like, okay, every time I play this rhythm I'm messing it up, isolate the rhythm, take it through the song. First slower tempo, and then just push it up. Make sure that you don't play this stuff with backing tracks, because it's more difficult to feel a groove when it's 2 and 4 like this, and you have to keep it yourself much more, and that's gonna make it easier when you play with a backing track. Because in a way it's like a backing track is something you can lean on too easily. So that's in this. I think that's part of that discussion. So you're better off not playing. I wouldn't even do this with Drum Genius. Actually, I would just say, okay, if we're working on really getting a strong sense of the groove and the tempo and playing something on it, just stick with the metronome. And then, of course, not something too obvious. Again, you don't want to lean on it, so it's not 1 and 3, it's 2 and 4, or it's only 2 and only 4, in my opinion, anyway. And yeah, then there's this whole thing about developing material to play, because if you're working on a tune which you eventually want to play fast, then of course you have to practice slower, but don't practice too slow. I think that's also something that for me was important to figure out, that if I play a high tempo, I'm not playing really a lot of triplets or 16 notes and stuff like that. So when I practice towards playing a high tempo, I don't want to do that either. So I want to play a slower tempo, but not so slow that I start playing double time or doing interesting 8-note triplet stuff and stuff like that. I want to keep it just in the 8-note feel. And of course you also have to be aware that when you play higher tempos, yeah, that's also something that I didn't point out. You need to play more even. So when you're playing a slow tempo, then you can do like. So that's really swing. So it's really. But yeah, if you're in a higher tempo, then I don't know if I can do that with this one. We can just try. So you're going to hear is like, if I play really triplety, and really I'm not even playing triplets, then it gets sort of jumpy and it doesn't sit well in the groove, and it's really technically really difficult to play. And if you play even, so more just straight eights. Then that's a lot easier, and that's also just how that works. If you listen to recordings, they will play more even when they're playing faster tempos, simply because it sounds better, and also because it's easier to play on guitar, certainly. So that's also an important thing. And then for the rest, like, yeah, practice it at tempos where you can play freely, and it's no problem, and you have an overview. But at the same time, don't go so slow that you start doing other things. So that you still have to keep it at a tempo where you can see yourself pushing it up. And then I would say, what works for me is just, I've taken periods where I take a piece and then I'll play it and then push up the metronome all the time and just do a few choruses and then move the metronome up a bit and then try a few choruses there and then just see where it's like, okay, where do we get to the point where I can't feel the metronome, well, it's 2 and 4 in this piece, or if some other, like, if I can't play the changes anymore or something like this. It's like you look for those borders so you have an idea about where can you go and what can you do, and then you can always try and say, well, I want to work on pushing those up, and then you do that. But then you need to work on it on a little bit more systematically, I think. So yeah, because I'm not sure exactly what you mean. I think like this thing about feeling the groove, playing more even, and the comping thing to just get into the groove and practicing with metronome on 2 or 4. I think those are the most important things about it. And otherwise, you can always just ask me again if you think that I'm not really sort of hitting or answering your question. I would love to have you do a segment of your Q&A on comping. Such an important thing to know. So many teachers rely so heavily on soloing. Reminds me of the old adage, learn to solo, you get the girls, learn to comp, you get the job. So I guess the best way I can answer this is to just talk a little bit about what I think comping is, and then maybe a little bit about the different skill sets that are involved in it, because it's very open-ended, and comping is an extremely wide topic, because of course jazz as a genre is very wide. So there's of course a different types of comping in almost all genres of the music. So I can't cover that in a Q&A, but I guess we can also just look at it in a sort of general terms and what it is, because I'm not sure that as a guitar player right now it's likely that you're not being asked so much because you're a good comper. It's not always true, but it seems a little bit like guitar players are becoming more like horn players, and they are not as often expected to be able to comp well as a piano player is, for instance. But at the same time, you do a lot of work comping. At least I do. I'm used to it. I like comping a lot, mostly because it's about interacting with the other people that I'm playing with, and you get to decide a lot of things, and you have to react to how you do the decisions that you put out there, or the things you throw out there, and see how the other guys react to it, and then that connection is going to build the music, and you have an influence on it, and I like that part of playing is something I like. It's really why I like jazz, is because it's so interactive. So that's for me a huge part of playing jazz in general. So if we break down comping, I guess you're laying down a groove. So there's like a rhythmical component to it that is about inserting some sort of or conveying some sort of groove and some sort of feel to the music, and that can be playing a complete groove in some styles, but it can also just be playing the right type of accents, or not playing accents, in fact, for other genres of music. And then you're also, of course, laying down the harmony. So you have to make the chords clear. And again, this is something that behind some soloists you don't need to be that clear, and behind other soloists you have to be really clear. And you have of course also, again, like you have different grooves for different subgenres of jazz, and also just within any type of modern jazz you already have several grooves that you might come across as a normal thing in what you're playing. In harmony you will also have different genres, so you have different sounds, and it's good to have an idea about what you can do with different chord types, and also have some sort of understanding of what types of chords will work well for what types of situation. So just to give an example of that. So if you're playing something that's really more like bob oriented, and there's a drummer and a bass player, and they're playing a swing in 4, then so right now I'm just assuming that I don't have to do like, because they're taking care of that, and then what I'm doing is I'm just playing these chords, and then hopefully I'll put that in, and that's the next part that's part of comping is of course reacting to what is going on around you. So you have to put down the chords in a way that fits with both the genre but also the soloist, and in jazz this is really important, that you have to try not to get in the way of the soloist, so don't be too busy, but you also need to know when to lay down the harmony, and when they play something, sometimes they'll play stuff and it's not harmonically clear what is going on, so they're not playing something that's really like you can really hear the chord, and then maybe you want to sort of put down the chord under that, because that makes the song sound better, and you don't lose track of, for the listener, they don't lose track of the song, and you need to sort of be able to judge when that happens. And then the other thing that's happening now when I'm playing these chords is that I'm actually playing, I guess when I'm playing these kind of accents, I'm really in a sort of conversation with the drummer. So a friend of mine told me that comping was really just a conversation between the snare and the chord instrument, and then the bass player and the right cymbal were basically the groove. And that's very true for a lot of swing, that you kind of have to log in with the drummer and have the same type of ideas, and it is essentially the snare and the bass drum that are giving the rhythmical accents and the ideas, and you're better off if you can sort of log into what they're doing and learn that vocabulary of rhythms that they use. And oddly enough, I'm pretty sure I have a fairly big vocabulary of those type of rhythms, because I played with a lot of different drummers, and I always try to zoom in on what they're doing, both in my, and I actually do that when I'm soloing as well. So try to log into their rhythmical ideas and their flow. but I don't actually have like a list of rhythms that they use or something like that. That I know it's there and I can react to what's going on, but I'm just listening and playing along actually. And then I also realize afterwards sometimes that we're always doing the same thing, but I don't know what the rhythms are because I never had to. I just learned it while playing, which is the easiest way I think for this. Also, I don't think it makes too much sense to really practice too many rhythms. But it would be an interesting thing to talk about with drummers because I think they actually practice. I've played very little drums, but I think they actually practice stuff like this. But for the rest, they're also just listening and copying stuff off of records. And I think for this, the stuff I'm talking about now is really like the little bit bebop and also a little bit hard bop. If you're not listening to the hard bop where they really play, hard bop becomes less communication at some point. And can also become quite busy. If you listen to a piano player like Horace Silver, he's very busy all the time and playing a lot of chords. Where I think if you listen to somewhere in between would be like Wynton Kelly maybe. He might do some stuff that's really like riff oriented, but he'll also just try to react to what the soloist is playing. So the idea is that you lay down the harmony and then you try to do something when the soloist is not too active, so you don't get in the way of the soloist. That's of course important also, because you want to do something that fits with whatever he's doing. If he takes some breaks, and then for the rest you just. So that would be sort of with an imaginary soloist. I'm sometimes just or playing nothing or just leaving a chord hanging. And for the rest, it's like just small rhythms. And of course, you can develop that. There are parts of what you're playing that are going to be sort of longer form. So there are certain sort of cliche riffs that resolve in a certain way that are just known by most drummers, which again I can't just play them, but I know they're there, and I know when they come along, and I can play along with them. And maybe I should check them out one time to really know what they are, but yeah, I don't right now. So that's in terms of the rhythms, and then so if you're playing bebop, then all these like triad-based voicings. I use a lot of small voicings because it makes it easier for me to react. If I have to just change it, an extension on a 3-note voicing, it's a lot easier than if I have all my hands tied up in a voicing like this. So I think that's one of the reasons why I tend to really use the smaller voicings, and also because I like moving the voicings around and changing stuff in them. So. I think a lot of it is also sort of melodic thinking. It's almost like a small chord melody or improvised chord solo behind the soloist that is making sense in itself, but also not getting in the way of the soloist. It's difficult to really explain it without having a soloist here, I guess. But I think that's what I'm trying to do with it. And of course, then this is if we're playing a bop type song. If you were to play the same song, so it's still Ladybird that I'm playing. If I was to play it in more like an open, even kind of way, then that might be something like. So in this sort of way, in that style of music, you wouldn't expect so many places where you have abrupt endings in the solos and stuff. So you're not going to be filling in gaps and jabbing in chords the same way. So you're much more about laying down harmony as a sort of blanket of sound, and that's also why you use voicings like this and you really sort of try to add some interesting colors. I'm using more notes and sustaining a lot more, because I don't have to, the groove that I'm hearing, I don't have to sort of sit in the groove and convey like almost like a, since swing is I guess originally a dance groove, I don't have to really convey that. So that's why I'm doing it like this. And that's sort of the type of harmony that will fit when you're playing like that. And you will find that sometimes, maybe in the beginning of it depends on the band you're playing in, but in the beginning of a solo, this is the kind of sound that will fit the soloist, and then later it will become a more locked in groove and stuff like that. So that's another thing about sort of reacting to what is going on and playing something. If I play like this, then the drummer will hopefully react to it and act in a certain way, and that's just as important. Another thing that's also important is to be aware of that you can really play all the grooves quite well. So you have to not only be able to know swing well, you have to play even and have an idea in your head like how does even sound. You need to know your New Orleans type swing things, Schofield stuff, Latin. All these grooves are important, and you need to check those out as well. But that to cover all of them now is going to be a little bit much probably. So this is just some basic ideas on comping. So I mean, how to comp with the pianist in the band. Do they both play, or only one and the other doesn't play in the same time? If they both play, what are your advices to make them musical together? Comping with a piano player is probably one of the most difficult things that you have. I think there are not really a lot of examples of it, and most of the examples that I can think of has the guitar player shifting from playing a real comping role to playing more like a part of the rhythm section that's supplying the groove. So what I'm thinking about is like Oscar Peterson trio with Herb Ellis, or that period. You hear also Jim Hall does this a lot. If he's playing with a piano player, he'll play in fourths most of the time. And if you're playing a style of music where that's possible, then of course you can just do that. So but then that's sort of shifting your own place in the rhythm section to part of the ones that are supplying the groove. And of course then that has to fit with how the bass player and the drummer plays. That might not be the case, and it might not fit the style that you're playing. So there it's well defined if you do that, of course. In general, probably you would want to not play at the same time too often. I'm trying to think of. I know there is like a Herbie Hancock album where he plays with Schofield, where they actually comp at the same time, and that doesn't always work, or they tend to clash once in a while. And you can also just say, well, it clashes once in a while, and then that's okay, and then they just have to solve it, and then that's part of it. That's certainly a way to do it. I think most of the time the most practical thing to do is to take turns comping. If you're playing swing stuff like I was just talking about in the whole section on swing, on comping, and then of course you have other styles where you are more allowed to play other things. Or if it's more modern, then maybe it makes sense to have these types of comping things that will sometimes work. Or if it's really Latin, then the piano player it will probably work the best, also sound-wise, if the piano player is just laying down the chords and if you do this, so and then you're sort of laying down the traditional guitar groove, and that shifts from different genres. You need to check out like what makes sense and what will work. Because jazz uses so many grooves, like some grooves will have a well-defined guitar part and some just don't, and then maybe you're better off just giving each other the room to comp one soloist and then take turns and talk about it. But it really depends on the piano player also. I know a few piano players where I can actually play at the same time as them, and that will work most of the time. But I also know quite a few piano players where that just doesn't work, and I think it has to do with like what I talked about in the comping thing, is that you have this dynamic going on where there's like a bass player. The drums are sort of split in between laying down sort of the drive of the groove. So if you're playing a swing groove, like the right cymbal and the hi-hat maybe, and then together with the bass player, that's laying down sort of a general feel of the piece, and then the snare and the bass drum, and then the one comping, whether it's a piano player or a guitar player, that's like a conversation. So that's kind of something that's related to that, and then together, those things together will comp the soloist. And if that's the case, then as soon as you add another somebody playing accents, then the drummer has to have sort of log in with two people at the same time, and you also have three sets of ears instead of two, and that gets very, very complicated very quickly. So in those cases, you're better off maybe avoiding it completely by just saying, well, we only have one person comping, or or you can agree in advance, like, okay, in this section I'll just lay down the chords and you do all the interaction, and you almost have to have the drummer in on that as well, that discussion, so that he's not that he's focusing on the right person. But I mean, any good drummer will probably figure that out quite fast. So one guy is just laying down the harmony, and the other guy is interacting more and playing smaller chords. That's one way of doing it. And then still you have this thing that the choices of extensions might make it clash, and the interpretation of the chords, because there's a lot of interpretation of chords happening if you're playing a song. And yeah, that if you know the piano player, and the soloist, and that's always going to be the case, if you know the people you're playing with really well, I guess you would develop some sense of feeling for what they're doing in terms of extensions, and what fits and what doesn't fit, and what they'll do at certain places. And for the rest, just listen as much as possible. It's a really good exercise in the sense that you have to watch out that you're not comping and not getting in the way, and not doing something that's out of place. So it's a good exercise, but it's also hard to get it to really sound good, I think. Which is also why I don't think there are that many records where that actually happens. I would be curious though, if some people have like records of piano players and guitar players comping together that they think are really great, then leave a comment on that. It'd be worthwhile checking out, actually. Maybe there's some stuff that I don't know, because I tend to mostly think about older recordings where the guitar players are really playing in 4 most of the time when they're comping them. Or maybe, there's some Abercrombie maybe where he plays with... So I guess my memory card was full there. So what I was saying with the Abercrombie thing is that the records that I heard where he plays like this, the sound that they're trying to create is really that the chords are sort of floating along, and they're like a continuous sound, just because the voicings are interesting and it's some nice colors, and that's the emphasis. And then both him and the piano player does it like that, and that works, I guess, if you really know what's going on that. Then you have to agree on in advance what are the extensions we're playing, or you just really have to know what the other guy is doing and manage to get that to work. So that's sort of one way. But yeah, as I mentioned, if you guys know any some good records with a piano player and a guitar player comping at the same time behind somebody else, I would be interested to know. Actually, it's something that I don't know any really, really good examples of. When it comes to really sort of playing more sort of bop stuff, it's not done as much. So it's tricky, and I think you can only just try and see if you really have to get along well with the piano player, and you really have to know what he or she is doing, and dive into that. That's anyway interesting, so that's not such a big problem, because it's nice to know what they're doing. And yeah, I've had good and bad experiences with it. I've even had been playing in a band that had 2 different piano players, and oddly enough, it's like I could really comp well with one, and the other one was impossible to work with almost. In terms of being able, because it's also a matter of if they can listen to what you're doing and actually sort of relate to that in some way and work with it. And some piano players just don't want to, and I'm sure it's the same for guitar players. Some guitar players just won't listen to the piano player, or and then it doesn't work. You have to be open-minded and open to communication if you want to make that work. That's extremely important on a very sort of subtle level, also. But it's also a challenge that's worth checking out and seeing what is happening. And there are really not too many rules about it. A good thing would be to, if you have an idea that something works, then make sure to record the band and check what it actually sounds like, because it can also be a complete circus or too busy if you're both doing a lot of rhythmical things at the same time, for instance. So yeah, so much for that. Anybody who sees this, who has a recommendation for a good album with a guitar player and a piano player comping at the same time behind somebody else, they're very welcome. That will be interesting to check out. I think that's always interesting. Can outside playing ideas be harmonized, or would that sound bad? I guess some of the other places where I talked about playing outside, so there's at least one other Q&A, and also I think there are 2 or 3 lessons on YouTube of my lessons that are dealing with sort of outside material. If we define outside, then when we're playing a piece of music, we have a certain idea about what we expect to hear, and that will be inside. So as soon as something is not what we expect to hear, then it's outside. And I think in the examples that I already talked about, I tend to think a lot in chords when I'm doing this. So like side slipping, and I don't think side slipping in scales. I guess I think it in chords. So that means that it is already harmonized. And then of course you can choose to harmonize it in different ways. You can make it a part of the arrangement of the song. So you can just write in another chord symbol. So if we have a 2-5-1 in F, so then you might play it like that. So you go up to the A flat, down to the G minor again, and C7, and then to F. And you might do that only as a solo. So I can of course play both things at the same time, but still, so like that would be a line doing that. But you can also just say, well, I want to have that every time, or at least I want to have that clear in the arrangement, and then you'll write in that chord symbol, and then it's harmonized. So that's not so difficult. And I think a lot of the things, like one of the things that we don't think about as an outside thing is of course the alto dominant, and there we kind of expect people to go along. So if I'm playing an alto dominant in a standard, I guess I expect the people behind me to realize that it's that, and then choose a dominant voicing or a bass line that fits that somewhat, or at least be aware of that I'm doing it. And I think that goes for a lot of stuff. So if I suddenly decide to play a MIDI 7 sharp 5 or something like this, then hopefully the people behind me will recognize the sound and put down a chord that fits that. That's kind of how it works. And then if you want to have it written into the sheet music, then yeah, sure, you do that. I mean, it's not so difficult. You just write an arrangement and then say I want that chord there. So yeah, you can harmonize it, and actually in a way, because it's coming out of thinking other chords when you're playing outside anyway, then of course that's also just my thinking. Oops. So I don't, I think more in chords than scales. I don't really think in scales. So in that, so that means that it is already harmonized and already put in there. And even if you're not harmonizing it, I mean, you're gonna lose a bit of it if you do. So if we do that example again, then it doesn't sound strange when we put the chord on there. So the effect of it is a lot less. As soon as you start moving a bigger part of the band into playing the outside thing, it's gonna sound more normal. It's not gonna clash, and it's not gonna create any tension. So it might work better if you don't harmonize it, which is the other part of it. Like you have some players who will say that they don't like their accompanist to go along with alto dominance because they want to hear the clash, which is a choice too, I guess. So So yeah, so that's sort of a question of taste if you want to have that. Now I'm of course talking about this in a jazz setting, and to the best of my knowledge, you don't actually play jazz. So so maybe you mean harmonized in terms of a second voice. But that would be the same thing, because normally if it's a chord and you're thinking you already have a scale and a chord from where the outside melody is coming from, and if that's the case, then you can harmonize that just as easily as you could if it was inside. It doesn't really matter if you wanted a second voice for that. So so that was just to cover that, because I'm not sure what you mean with it otherwise. And yeah, so you can do that, of course. And another option is also, if we say, well, we don't tell the rest of the band that we want to play outside, but we still play it and we also play chords. I'd actually do that quite often. So sometimes I'll just choose sort of semi-horrendous sounding chords as a surprising sound and then put them in there. And you can do that too, of course, because if the bass player is like, and you go, you get that sound. So let me just do that with my fingers, that's easier. Then that will work. Quite well, actually. And you get this is a lot of tension, and then you really have like the class. If that is the sound you're going for, then by all means, you know, then play a line that's like that. You really add that chord in there will make the line, the clash, stronger and clearer, and give you some options. So so in that way that could work. And I think also you'll find that very often when you're playing stuff with a walking bass, then the piano player, if there's or guitar player that's playing behind you, doesn't have to lay down every quarter note, so he's a lot faster to react. And if you start playing something that's like somewhere else, or if you start playing a major 7 sharp 5 or an alt dominant, he's quicker to react because he doesn't have to put down every quarter note all the time, and that makes it more free to react, which is also just his job more than the bass player, I guess. So for that, yeah, you can harmonize a lot of stuff, and then you have all these varying degrees. So maybe just to sum that up a bit, you can of course harmonize. I'm anyway thinking in terms of chords when I'm playing outside, so it is in that sense already harmonized. It's already coming out of harmony, and that means that it's easy to put a chord down there. Then you can choose to add the chord to the arrangement, which is going to take away a lot of the outside. It's still going to be a surprising chord, but it's not going to be like clashingly outside sounding. It's just going to be sort of an interesting turn of the chord progression. So that would be one way, and the other way is to see what happens, and then you can just leave it to chance and see if you don't put it in the arrangement, and then see if the guy comping or the girl comping will follow, and also do whatever side slip or any type of other sound that they may or may not know that you're using. And of course you can lay down, but I mean when I'm playing with a piano player, I'm less likely to actually lay down chords, because that's getting in the way of the piano player also, and I'm just gonna leave him to do the chords. So I'm not gonna, but if I'm playing in a trio setting, then I might lay down the chords, and then I do that actually. I think it works there. It really works well as a sort of a surprising effect, that you really put down some chords that are sounding really strange for that place, with whatever harmony that I already talked about, different kinds of harmony that you can use for playing outside. So for that it works really well. That was some philosophy and some answers to some of the questions I got from you guys on comping, playing fast tempos. As always, because actually these questions are sort of useful to share some experiences on, I think. So if you have ideas on how to work on playing faster tempos or things you have to think about, then share them, comment on the video. And the same goes of course for if you have ideas on comping and some things that are important, maybe something that I missed, that you can contribute to that discussion, then that's really useful. And also what I already talked about a few times, the idea if you have an album where a piano player and a guitar player are accompanying a soloist at the same time, then a good example of that is always welcome. I think that's interesting to check out, because it is, as I mentioned already, it's very difficult to do. So that's an interesting thing to check out for sure. If you wanna support my videos, then like this video. If you're not already a subscriber, subscribe to my channel. I'm sure that if you manage to sit through my whole Q&A, then probably the stuff that's on my channel is anyway interesting to you, because it's a lot less long form than this is, and there's a lot of stuff. I've been doing lessons for a long time. Another way you can directly support me and help me get more time to do all these videos is to go to my web store and check out if there's something you might want to check out there. And of course, spread the word. So if you find that some of the stuff I'm talking about here is useful to other people, then share this video on social media. That's also useful for me. But certainly, if you think it's worth it, then that's also a way to help me. That's for sure. Last time I asked you guys a question about the format of the video. I also talked about that, the format of the video lessons, and that was really useful. So now, since I think you guys, the Q&A guys, are for the most part like the hardcore of the people checking out my videos, and I've published 2 or 3 backing tracks lately, and mostly I make the backing tracks because those are the things that I just play on when I make other videos or for lessons in my web store and stuff like that. So I'm curious what you think about the backing tracks, and what you would like to see. If you like them at all. If you don't use them, then that's okay too. But if you do use them, or if you would be interested in backing tracks, what would you want, and what would you like to see, and is there something missing? Do I need to put the chords in the video? Stuff like that. So suggestions are more than welcome. And of course, if you have a question for the Q&A, then leave a comment on the video, and you can also send me a message on Facebook or Instagram or Snapchat if you want to ask me something about gear, harmony, soldering, guitar cases, technique, whatever. So yeah, thank you for watching, and there's a new lesson on Thursday, so see you then.